Yesterday, Mike Caspino, who represents Terry McDonough, the former Cardinals front office executive, in what was a successful arbitration somehow in the NFL's secret rigged kangaroo court, somehow they won. There's a lawsuit now advancing claims that are unrelated, but kind of related to what was addressed in arbitration. This time around, there's no gag order. There's no confidentiality requirement. The lawyer can speak his mind, and speak his mind he did about specifically Cardinals owner Michael Bidwill. Here's Mike Caspino from Doug Franz Unplugged yesterday, teeing off on the Cardinals owner.
The first thing I found out is Michael Bidwill, and I want to tell you, I'm not a judgmental person, but I have to say this, is a horrible person. I mean, through his core. Is he Dan Snyder? I think he's worse than Dan Snyder. I really do. I think that what I've read and seen him do and know of him to do, he's worse than Dan Snyder. It struck me that, and in speaking to other people there, that he is such a hands-on owner that he goes into offensive coordinators and tells them who to get the ball to. And he's making all of the decisions regarding the talent, regarding who to draft. And he's making it off because he paid for a year or two at some fancy boarding school in Washington, D.C. And it just struck me right there why the Cardinals are so bad. They have an owner who doesn't listen to the people around him and thinks he's smarter than everybody else, even with the game of football.
There is plenty more in that podcast interview. We'll be writing some stories about other issues that came up. Just so we're fair and balanced here, the team's response to the Caspino interview was as follows. While we have a completely different perspective than Mr. Caspino, we are not going to comment publicly while the legal process is ongoing. End of quote. There really is a lot there. I recommend anyone who's remotely interested in the case to listen to it. It'll be interesting to see how many other media outlets actually have the willingness to talk about it, to write about it. I think it's a huge deal. I think Michael Bidwill benefits from the fact that the Cardinals have a low profile. I think Mary Jo White already should have been in there investigating anything and everything about the organization the same way they did in Washington, because it sounds like there's a lot there. It sounds like there's a lot of dysfunction that manifests itself in potential mistreatment of employees that the league should be concerned about. And beyond that, Chris, we talk about this all the time. Owners meddle. They act like they don't. They want to be able to blame their football people, but most owners have a spoon in the stew, and it sure sounds like Michael Bidwill stirs that stew with a pretty big spoon.
Yeah, maybe more aggressively than we ever thought, right? But, I mean, that's they're going through it. They've had a rough few years there in Arizona with the way they're perceived by the public, and now this, right? I mean, huge mistake they made by putting out the statement originally about Terry McDonough and defaming him that way. I mean, that was I'm not even a lawyer, and I would have been like, really? We're going to put this out? Are you sure? This sounds like we're just asking to give money away and have an issue here. I would think the league is watching them closely. I would, and it's going to be interesting to see where this goes. One thing I wanted to ask you, Mike, was with Caspino saying all of that, right, does he not have to worry about crossing a line of defaming Bidwill or doing anything there in that type of scenario?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I think he believes he could back it all up based upon
things he
evidence
knows
that was
already.
developed in the litigation.
Right.
And anytime anybody decides they're going to file a defamation lawsuit, they open up their entire life for scrutiny. Roger Clemens found that out the hard way. You have to be very careful and very judicious in going forward with the defamation claim because your whole life is going to be examined with a fine-tooth comb if that happens. Now, you mentioned the PR statement that was issued after Terry McDonough initially filed his arbitration claim. And what makes that even more shocking in hindsight, what do they say now? Well, we have no comment as the legal process is ongoing. That's what you should have done a year ago. And it was so egregious what they said about him and why they did it. It was so egregious that McDonough was able to win in the secret rigged kangaroo court $3 million. We talked about this when the decision was first released. You had at least a zero if you get to litigate that case in a real court of law.
Yeah.
And some of the other claims, he probably is successful on those. We're going to be writing something about the whole burner phone issue with former GM Steve Keim and how that was just kind of brushed under the rug.
Yeah,
There's plenty of evidence that apparently the league didn't even want. Caspino still has the burner phone that was given to Terry McDonough.
Yikes.
He says he offered it to Jeff Pash, the NFL's general counsel, and Pash was like, nah, we don't need it. We're fine. Are you kidding me? Are you not going to try to figure out, like, and this gets to the whole double standard that applies to teams. Some teams, if you even remotely, possibly, potentially cross the line, you are hammered. Other teams, do whatever you want. We don't care. There's plenty of problems that the league is going to have to deal with coming out of this interview from yesterday, Chris.
I would think so. Yeah, I would. Right. And it certainly seems like Caspino and McDonough are not – they're fearless as far as where they feel that the truth and facts and they have evidence on their side to where they're going to attack, full steam ahead.
Jim McCarthy is the person who issued the statement about Terry McDonough. He's the guy that McDonough's suing now because McCarthy doesn't fall under the secret rigged kangaroo court and can be sued in court. Here's the quote from Caspino about McCarthy. If anyone in this world is going to hell, it's Jim McCarthy. For a living, he disparages people on the internet. That's his job. And Michael Bidwill brought him in to do that about Terry. Quote from Caspino, not me. We'll see how that litigation goes, and we'll definitely be following it. Even if every other media outlet covering the NFL ignores it, and I doubt that NFL Network or NFL.com will be covering it, we definitely will. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.